Well, it's been 5 weeks now since the housing market really started to change. And today I'd like to unpack what the market's doing, where it's at, some things to consider over time and to keep watching. I have some brand new visuals today that I'd like to share for the first time. I hope you love them. This is Ryan with SacramentoAppraisalBlog.com. This will be about 20 minutes or so. I hope you enjoy and jump in with me. So here is one of my brand new visuals. I just made it this morning, and what I've been wanting to do is to show what is normal for this time of year for sales volume. Okay, the number of sales. And so this shows weekly sales volume. Let me explain all these squiggly lines. So in 2020 in blue, this is weekly volume in the Sacramento region. You could see it was increasing before. It's really taken a nosedive over the past 2 to 3 weeks. So why this is powerful, because in red, this is 2019 at the same time, and then in green, you see 2018 at the same time. So it really shows a normal trend would be increasing. We see more sales happening as spring unfolds, but it's been very definitive, the change we've seen in the market. And this isn't a surprise. We're not shocked because, of course, we're seeing subdued volume. We're in the middle of a pandemic. So similar dynamic in Sacramento County. The graph, has different numbers, but pretty much looks the same in terms of the trend. Here's a different way to look at volume, what's happening right now. Over the past week, we had 241 sales in the region, and compared to 571 the same week last year. And so it's been an incredibly striking difference. This graph, I know it's all squiggly. What it should be up here is that in a normal year, this graph would be way up here instead of down. And so it just shows the power of what's been happening in the pandemic, that the market's very much suppressed, and buyers, I would say that there's less demand. It's not even just about that there's less access to real estate, but a lot of buyers have been haphazard or saying, I'm not going to play the market right now. I need to sit on the sidelines and wait until this thing is over and figure things out, right? Here's a different way to look at volume. Here's from March 1st through April 18th. You can see volume, daily volume in green for 2019, and then daily volume in blue for 2020. And what we're starting to see is a definitive difference over the past couple weeks. Now, in terms of volume being down, and this is important to watch as a trend, because certainly in the future, if we see volume dip and all these other metrics dip, then maybe that's going to show up in prices too. But it's important to step back and go, the trend here didn't start in these past 2 weeks. What this reflects is what started to get into contract about a month ago. March 12th is what I call our coronavirus day, because that's the day that Tom Hanks came out and was said to have coronavirus. And that's a date that, national and local events en masse began to cancel. I would say that people became hypersensitive and alert to COVID-19 on that date, and which the stats really show. And so I'm looking at numbers before then and after then, and what I can say is that there's been less pending contracts since then, and it's beginning to show up in the numbers now finally. All right. There are 537 new listings this week. Here's what new listings look like on a daily basis. And that's significant because that was up about 10% from the previous week, but it's still down about 25% from 4 to 5 weeks ago. Now, here's the most interesting thing on this graph of, it looks like an EKG here, is that here's when we began sheltering in place. We had the most dismal week of the entire year for new listings besides the very first week of the year. And so since then, though, the subsequent 3 weeks after this really dismal week, after we began sheltering in place, it looks like more listings are hitting the market. I mean, they literally are. And so this tells us that sellers are maybe getting a little bit more comfortable with the process, or maybe it's many, real estate agents being deemed essential in some surrounding counties and having full access to real estate. It could be people getting more used to the idea of the pandemic and being able to operate within the confines that are present. So, but make no mistake, yes, these listings are down, but I think a lot of people would still be surprised to see that there are over 500 this past week. Here's a different way to look at it, where 2020, here are new listings in red, and in the background are listings during the same week in 2019. So last week, listings were down 43%, and this week, listings were down from last year by 32%. So I'd say that this is probably the real stat to pay attention to, because yeah, we're down 25% from a few weeks back, but we're really down 30 to 40% of where we should be if we had a normal market right now. Properties on hold status, 624 since March 12th. Properties that have canceled, 529 since March 12th. Here's a little tidbit that yesterday was actually the first day since March 12th where we had zero canceled listings. And so interesting to see if we'll start to have less. I wouldn't call that a trend. I would just say that, okay, we had one day with zero cancellations. There have been 1,153 canceled and hold listings since March 12th, and this is a striking number because it's way out of sync with what's normal. But I think we look at this, like I keep saying, is that we have to ask, when are these sellers going to start re-engaging with the market? Some of them surely are going to be on the sidelines, or they've had lifestyle changes, and they're not going to come back to the market. But there's definitely a huge host of these who likely will. And so, will they wait until sheltering in place is over? Will they see that the market's moving somewhat right now? It's not as vibrant as it was a month ago, but will they sort of, take their chances now? I mean, we don't know. Or will they wait until everything's normal, many, many months down the road, presumably? So, we'll see. Here's pending contracts since early March. From the beginning of the year, they were increasing, and they should continue to increase as spring unfolds. But the market was interrupted. All right, when everything really hit the fan with coronavirus, we've seen a downward trend. Now, this past week is down 35% from the beginning of March. And so that's a definitive stat. When someone tells me, hey, everything's normal, I say, no, no, I don't think that that's honest when we look at the numbers. That's fiction. Things are not normal. Things are suppressed. We're in a pandemic, and these are market facts right now, okay? But here's a different way to look at it. I think there's two takeaways here. Over this past week in the region, there are about 400 pendings. And so that's clearly down from where it was, 4 to 5 weeks ago. But here's an interesting trend where you see that pendings are actually up and they've been on the rise for the past 2 weeks in the region. And so, on one hand, we could say that pendings are up 20% from where they were 2 weeks ago. And that's a fact. It's a market fact, but it could actually be a misleading headline if we don't also recognize that pendings are down from where they were, 4 to 5 weeks ago, and down to where they should be right now. And so I think when we're looking at stats, let's be really careful to not just look at, the one stat that looks glowing and sexy to share. Like, let's understand the whole market, okay? Here's the price of pending since April 1st. This type of graph is called a histogram. And basically what it does is it disperses prices throughout the market. It shows how prices are dispersed. And in short, I would say that pendings are dispersed through every price range. Okay. One thing that I'm watching is the top end of the market. We've seen a lot of changes with jumbo financing and such, and so over time, we have to really diagnose, hey, is the top end beginning to behave differently or not? I'll have some visuals eventually to maybe help show that and to watch inventory there. For now, I welcome your stories. Let me know what you're hearing in the trenches of escrows. Here's a different histogram, and it basically shows how long properties were on the market before they started pending. Okay, this considers all pendings from April 1st and onward as of just a few days ago. And so here's the interesting part. You look at this bar, and this bar is 5 days and less, where there's a lot of pendings, properties that went active, and then within 5 days, they're getting in the contract. Okay, and here's the 2 week markup here. And so you can see that half the pendings that have occurred since April 1st have been on the market for 2 weeks or less. Now, that's not a surprise. It's very normal in real estate, but I just think it underscores that buyers are watching the market. They are hungry for new properties and they are engaging with properties as long as they are priced reasonably. Okay, there are a lot of pendings at 90, 120, 180 days. Obviously not as many as the bulk of the market, but it does show that buyers today are still getting in a contract with listings that have been on the market for 4 or 5, 6 months plus. All right, and so, but again, if you're on the market for about 2 weeks and you're not getting any bites and there's no attention, then you might really strongly consider a price reduction, unless it's the type of home that needs a lot more exposure and that's normal. It's a sort of a unicorn property. You need to attract a unicorn buyer. But gosh, if the market is speaking, it's really time to listen. So here's all the stats. I just showed you all these visuals, and here's a way to look at the stats on one grid. And this week I actually added sales to this grid. I may add prices next week. Let me know if you'd like that. But one thing that I wanted to mention as we look at weeks of data and consider changes is that these stats can actually change slightly as they're refreshed. Okay, and so you might see me list, here's 241 sales in the region this past week. But there's actually some properties in MLS, I would say probably 10% or so, there might be 25, 30, just a guess, more properties that I include next week in my data. All right, and so because they're currently listed as pending, but real estate offices are closed. It's Sunday today, and so real estate offices are going to list these properties as closed, once they get to normal business, early this week. And so just something to keep in mind. This sounds technical. I'm sharing it for a reason though, as I start to talk about prices. Okay, so here are weekly median prices in the Sacramento region. And I just made this one. It looks familiar. It looks like that other one that I shared, with sales volume. So here's a 2020 median price in the region. And you can see, first of all, that it sort of, ticks up and down, and that's normal. And the median price in 2019 in red and 2018 in green, it's not this fluid thing where the market's just going up every single day like that. That's not, there's an ebb and flow to the market. But most notably, really over the past week or so, we've seen the median price take a dramatic turn down. Now, my sense is that we need a few weeks to understand more what prices are doing. All right. And so we need to watch this carefully, but let me draw your attention to this. Here's the same trend, the median price, and you can see it was definitely, it was about 450 and then now it's, about 425. And so it's taken a hit by, 20,000 plus. But what we have to consider is look what's happening with sales volume in the background. There's significantly less sales. Okay, this past week was really dismal. I mean, it should have been, twice as much sales basically or more. And so what can happen to price metrics, and it is so important to understand this, is that if there's less sales, it can make the metrics a little wonky. And so if there's less sales, also what we have to ask is, well, what is selling? Because imagine if, $1 million plus properties, there's less of those, and then there's more properties under 400,000. What that's going to do is that's going to drag the median price down. All right. Now, I shared on this slide that stats can be refreshed slightly. And so when I get more sales, and say we have 25, 30 plus more sales over this next week, and what if those were all above 600,000? What would that do to the median price? It would make it go up. And so one of the dangers of sharing real-time data is that we don't have everything in place all at once and these numbers can change. And so my sense is that we need to keep watching this before we say that the market has shifted. And we need to understand over time what is the property profile for properties that are moving. Okay, here's the median price in Sacramento County in 2020 in blue, 2019 in red, and 2018 in green. And right now, over the past couple of weeks, it's been very flat. It's been at 400,000. Okay. And so again, this is something we have to watch. Let's remember when we see a market, we see the market changing in the pendings. All right. And so technically these sales, these are properties that closed over the past couple of weeks. They really tell us what the market used to be like about a month ago. And so where is the current market at? We're going to see it in the listings and the pendings. And if the listings and pendings are down here, then we would expect for these prices to sort of decline and get to these. Now, if the pendings are all about flat, all around 400,000 or so, then hey, maybe this will keep going straight. We shall see. The trend is bound to be different in every neighborhood, and price range, and it's not going to be the same everywhere. All right, here's a different way to visualize Sacramento County with the median price in orange and then volume. All right, so here's two neighborhoods that I want to compare. There's a lot of numbers on this screen, but my observation is that people have been asking me, what happened in the market in this certain neighborhood or in this price range, and they're almost looking for clues. How much did value decline in the past as they make real estate decisions? I've had buyers reach out to me and ask me this because they want to get clues. Gosh, what if I buy? How much might the market decline? Or I've even had sellers ask me this. And in this case, someone reached out in Arden Park and said, "Hey, can you help me understand how much have prices changed in this neighborhood?" And so what I did in short, I compared all of 2005 with all of 2011, and there's about a $200,000 price difference. Okay. From a percentage standpoint, we would say that prices went down about 33%. Now, here's the interesting part. In Del Paso Heights, where prices are quite a bit lower than Arden Park, we saw about the same dynamic with about a $200,000 price hit. But here's the crazy part is that, the percentage change was about 75%. Because here's the thing, these prices were, the median price was at 250,000. You take out 200,000 and all of a sudden, it makes these numbers way inflated. And so this is an interesting thing to watch. Now, first of all, we don't just whatever happened in 2005 isn't the new template for all future market changes. All right. And so be really careful about looking at stats like this because you can't just look and go, yeah, I'm about ready to lose 200,000. That's not the case. In the 90s, when the market corrected, it was about a 10 to 15% haircut. Okay. It wasn't like in Sacramento County from 2005 to 2012, it was a 59% haircut, okay, for the median price. And so just be aware of that. But secondly, I would just say that recognize that not every neighborhood is going to have the same trend. It's interesting here that both neighborhoods, even though they have, total opposite price points, they experience the same amount of decline. But from a percentage standpoint, I mean, the difference was just huge. And so obviously from the percentage standpoint here, 75% loss, I mean, this represents some major carnage and so just declines in market change shows up differently depending on the neighborhood. Okay, some closing thoughts. Thanks for sticking with me. If you liking this so far, please give the video a thumbs up. We need time to understand the market, hands down. We're going to understand a lot more about prices in coming weeks, especially in May and June, but we just need time. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Everything's uncertain. It seems like there's new information every day in life, and same thing with real estate. Debbie Downer versus Debbie Realistic. A realtor reached out to me this week and she said, I kind of feel like I'm Debbie Downer when I'm sharing about real estate right now and I'm sharing real estate stats. And I turned the table and said, I think you're being Debbie Realistic because you're sharing market facts. The thing about real estate is that sometimes the temptation is to speak in only glowing terms, or it's almost like it almost feels sinful to talk about real estate in downward notions, or where I'd say that pending contracts are down 30 to 40%. And some people say stop being negative, and I'd say no. These are market facts, and facts empower people to make real estate decisions. Okay, people want the truth right now, and so props to her for being Debbie Realistic, so to speak. Should I list now or wait? This question is coming up. The problem with this question is that the answer really hinges on knowing the future. And that's the one ingredient we don't have right now. We don't know for sure what is going to transpire in the future. So I would say I would turn the table and then ask the seller, how much do you want to sell your house for? Here you want 400,000. Well, that's what it looks like it's worth right now in today's market. And so if you want a sure bet, then list right now. If you want to wait until this is all over and see what the market's like, months down the road, then do it then. Okay, what does your lifestyle mandate? I think the same thing with buyers as they're asking, should I buy now or wait? There's no one answer that's going to satisfy every buyer. What I'm finding is that I need to tailor advice depending on what the buyer's needs are. And so what is your lifestyle mandate? Or someone says, well, I really wanted to get into a situation where I can sell the property for about $100,000 more in 2 years from now. And for an investor like that, I would say, well, we're not in that kind of market. We weren't in that sort of market before this whole thing started. And so, your expectations are out of sync. And so for that person, I would say you should wait. you should not buy if that is your goal. But for the person who wants to have a lifestyle change or downsizing or upsizing, buying their first rental or whatever not, if the numbers work, then that's where I'd say to the person, know what the current market is doing, be aware of red flags in the future, and make your decision. Right? AB 828 is something to watch in California. This is a bill that would reduce rent by 25% across the board. And this is something very important. It could have a huge effect in the market, considering California that about half of all properties are rentals. And so it's easy to think that that's not the case, but it's really true. And so imagine if half of all properties all of a sudden get a 25% cut in their rent. Now, in today's social media age, it's easy to strongly favor the tenant and to vilify landlords. I get that, but there's a lot of hardworking people who are not going to be able to pay their mortgage and keep things afloat with that sort of haircut. Now, investors, though, if for the properties you own, I would say today is a market for being very sensitive to your tenants. Listen to your tenants and realize that if market conditions change, then you may have to go back to the table to renegotiate rent. Okay, and what I mean is that if within a pandemic historic trends show that rent takes a dip, well, then you're no longer at market rent if the market has changed and you're asking rent that's higher than the market will bear right now. And so I would say just be aware of that, be aware of market dynamics. And I know it's not commonplace since we've basically had 8 years of rent growth and in recent time, and it's just substantially higher than it used to be. But I'd say that if that begins to shift, then it's time to shift your expectations and not to expect that you can get $100 more every single year. If the market doesn't give it to you, then don't expect it. So watch demand for rural homes. I know Redfin came out and was talking about this week how their demand has increased for rural properties, people in quarantine wanting more space and such. I read an article. I didn't see any data that actually supported this notion, and so maybe it's too soon for that, but I would actually like to see some data rather than the idea. I know at least locally in California, we can have greater demand for space. I get that. I'm quarantined. Like, hey, I wish my yard was twice the size as it was, but at the same time, we still have challenges in the rural market with increasing insurance costs. And so it's not like people can just say, wow, I'd really love to have this home because it might cost more. And there are different dynamics in rural markets other than just, the desire for more space. I'd say be careful about accepting appraisal waivers today. In a market with increasing uncertainty, if you get in a contract, if you're a buyer, and it looks like it's 30 to 40 grand too high, it might be worth hiring an independent appraiser. Now, sellers, if the buyer hires an appraiser, it might not come in at the contract price if you're overpriced. And so I just say be open to negotiate. This can be tricky. This can be an extra layer of frustration, but buyers are in a place where they are going to be able to negotiate more, and I just because the market is allowing them to do so. And so sellers, please listen to your buyers, whether it's with an appraisal waiver or negotiating on price, asking for credits and such. Just be aware. I'd say though, buyers, don't get crazy with your requests. I read a piece. A Facebook post this week from someone in a different market that said that they are in contract. The appraisal came in right at contract price, and then last minute the buyer came to the table and said, I'd like to ask for a 10% reduction in the price because of uncertainty in the market. And that's a really absurd request from a buyer unless the rest of the market is experiencing those sort of rapid declines. Okay, I get uncertainty, but that type of uncertainty for an individual is different than the whole market being uncertain. And so buyers, you've got to be realistic with what your ask can be. And yeah, you can technically ask that, but that's not a request that's likely going to be accepted. And buyers, if you're that far in the game and you're about to close, I mean, you've signed a contract and you'll have to deal with the ramifications of what it looks like to back out, whether you even can do that. All right. The last but not least, be safe and cultivate peace. No matter what's going on in life, what your circumstances are, I just hope and pray you have peace. This is me. That's my contact information. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. But if you have questions or insight, share in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. I value it. I'll keep making these videos as long as you guys keep watching. So thank you so much.